and welcome to the Let's Make Food from Food Kitchen. Today we're using up some sourdough discard to make sourdough crackers. We fed our sourdough starter, and what we're going to use is what we took out to throw away, but we can use it to make things like delicious crackers. So what I have here is 1 cup of sourdough discard. It's unfed. I didn't add the flour or the water yet, so that's what that is. I have some flour here. This is 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour and 1/2 cup of unbleached white flour. You can use all white flour, you can use all whole wheat flour. It depends on what kind of flavor you like. The whole wheat flour is going to be very strong and I want to say earthy kind of is a good descriptive, but we're just going to dump that right in. This recipe is relatively simple and quick. We have salt. This is just sea salt. And just put it all in there. And I have butter. This is unsalted butter, 4 tablespoons. And all of these ingredients and measurements will be down below in the description, as they usually are. The next ingredients are optional for you to use if you want to flavor with garlic. This is a generous 1/2 teaspoon of garlic, or maybe it's a teaspoon. Look down in the description, we'll find out for sure. And this one is fresh rosemary from my garden. It gives it a very bold flavor, so if you have little ones that don't like that, you can divide your dough, which you're going to have to do here in a minute anyway, and then put it in half of your crackers, which is I think what we'll do, just so you can see how that works. We just need to mix all of this together to make our dough. It's the butter, the flour, the salt, and the starter. Okay, at this point, this is what your dough should look like. It'll pull apart pretty easily, but it's not going to stretch. Make it into kind of a uniform shape ball the best you can do. And then what you want to do is split it in half. So I'm just going to take my spatula and do the best. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just going to roll them out in a little bit here, but this is what your halves should look like. I'm just going to put one on this parchment paper. I'm going to take this half and add my rosemary, and I'm not going to be super picky about how much is in there. I'm just going to gauge it by how it looks, because that's how it's going to look when your final crackers are done. So I put about half of what I had, and I'm just going to kind of squeeze it all in there and see what it looks like, and if I feel like that's not enough, I can add some more. I had about 1 tablespoon in there to do this, and I think that's probably going to be, so I'm going to add some more. There's not very much showing in there, so I'm just going to pull that open again and just put the rest of it in, and I'm just going to keep folding it and mixing it together until I feel like it's well blended. So again, the garlic and the rosemary is optional, and maybe down the road we'll make some other crackers like sourdough cheddar crackers, different flavors, maybe add some rye to it, make some rye crackers with our sourdough. We'll play around with it. We'll see where it gets us. I'm going to clean this up and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, super easy. Now, the next thing we want to do is flatten these down to about a rectangular shape. They don't have to be perfect. You don't need to roll them with a pin. You just want it to be something like this. It doesn't even have to be a perfect rectangle. We're going to take it and put it on plastic wrap, because we don't want any of the moisture to go anywhere. We're going to wrap them up like this, and we're going to stick them in the fridge for 30 minutes. All right, it's been 30 minutes. We are ready for step 2 of our sourdough crackers. I've got my oven on to 350 degrees. I've taken out one of my 2 rectangles because I want the other one to stay chilled, because we got that butter in there. We want it to be workable and not stick to everything as much as possible. So I have a rolling pin. This is a French rolling pin. It doesn't have the handles on it. And I'm just going to put a little flour on it, as much as it'll stick to it. And what we want to do is get these rolled out about the shape of our pan. I have 2 different sizes. This is the size that fits in my oven, and then this is the half sheet that would fit in a standard oven. One of these will do this size, so half of your dough will do the half sheet. So I'm going to roll mine out a little bit and try and get it kind of even, and then I'm going to cut this one in half, which is a step you'll skip if you're using the larger pan. So I'm just going to take a pizza cutter, you can use a knife or whatever. I'm going to set this aside, and then I'm going to put this back in the middle, and if you want to try and get it as square as possible, you can fold it and then flip it over. And this doesn't need to be perfect. It's your own crackers. It's not going to be shaped unless you have like a dough roller for noodles or something. It's not going to come out perfectly even unless you're a perfectionist and work on it forever, and I'm just willing to not go that far. So I'm going to roll it out. You want it to be fairly thin because, again, these are just crackers. It's not a bread, it's a cracker. So you want to get it as thin as possible, maybe a 1/16 of an inch if we're gauging things that way. And I can feel my rolling pin start to stick a little, so what I'm going to do is just take another little bit of flour. I'm not going to do it over the crackers though, because I don't want a bunch of extra flour on there. So I'm going to roll it and get it as flat as I can. And the reason I'm using parchment paper, by the way, there's a couple of reasons. One, I don't have to grease my pan. Two, it makes it a lot easier to transfer your crackers onto your baking sheet. And I think that's about as good as I'm going to get thinness wise. There. So you can see this is very, very thin. What I'm going to do now, there's a couple more steps before we put it on our baking sheets. Set that aside. You need to score it all over the place. Use a fork if that's what you have. If you have a pizza docker, roll it. You want to get holes in here, and that will help keep it from bubbling up and burning in those spots that bubble up. So I've done that. The next step I want to do, this is olive oil. It's not extra virgin or light, it's just regular olive oil. You can use avocado oil or whatever it is that you prefer to use in terms of cooking oils. And you're just going to lightly coat the top of it. And it doesn't have to be perfect or pretty, just like everything else, but it can be if you want it to be. Okay, that is good. I just like a little light coating all over the whole thing. And I'm going to set that aside. The next thing I'm going to do is cut it up. You can use a knife, you can use one of these pizza cutters. If you have a pastry roller, you can use that. Try to get them even in terms of size, that way they'll cook up a little more evenly. As you can see, what I'm cutting here is not exactly perfect, and that's totally fine. Okay, that's done. And this is what I mean about easy to transfer. We're just going to take our pan, slide it right there, and on it goes, just like that. So I'm going to put it in the oven. It's going to go for 20 to 25 minutes. You're going to start watching for the edges of each cracker. When they start to turn brown, it's about time to pull them out. One of the things you can do to speed up this process is use 2 baking sheets if you have them and 2 of the racks in the oven. Just set them evenly apart in the center of the oven, slide both cookie sheets on with your crackers, then halfway through your baking time you're going to pull out the cookie sheets, put the one from the bottom on the top and the one from the top on the bottom. I've got my last batch out of the oven here, and as you can see, most of them have a nice little golden brown color to it, and the edges are starting to get a little darker. This part over here got darker because it was thinner than the rest of it. So when I rolled it out, I rolled this side a little bit thinner. So if you can get it even, you'll have a little bit less of that problem. And I did the same thing with this one too. There was a part in the center that really kind of dried out and thinned really more than I expected it to. And that'll happen. They're homemade crackers. They're not, commercially made with special equipment to make everything uniform and perfect. So I'm gonna let these cool completely. After that, I'm going to move them into a Ziploc bag, get as much air out as I can, and seal them up. They'll be good for 5 to 7 days that way. If you liked today's episode, please click the like button. If you enjoy this sort of content, please consider subscribing to our channel. Recipe and directions are down below in the description. If there's something you'd like to see us make or have any questions, please let us know what it is in the comments below. From my kitchen to yours, let's make food from food.